The receipt trembled in Maria Alvarez's hand as she stared at the bold, unforgiving number at the bottom. $0. 000. And for a moment the hum of the late-night diner seemed to fade into a dull, aching silence, because she already knew what that meant for tomorrow's bus fare, for the overdue electric bill folded in her purse, for the cereal she'd stretch one more week for her 8-year-old son, Leo, who believed his mother could fix anything simply by smiling at it long enough. Maria had learned to read people the way sailors read weather, and the man who'd just paid and walked out, the sharply dressed, silver-haired gentleman with the calm eyes and expensive watch, had struck her as distant but not cruel, quiet but not unkind, which made the empty tip sting more than outright rudeness ever could. Still, she folded the receipt, whispered her practiced mantra, "Keep moving, keep serving," and went back to clearing his table. The diner smelled of coffee and fried onions, the kind of place where life's small defeats were absorbed into vinyl booths and laminated menus, and as Maria reached for the plate, she noticed it was heavier than it should have been, a strange resistance as she slid it aside, revealing a thick, neatly folded envelope tucked underneath, her name written on it in careful, deliberate letters, Maria. Her breath caught, 1,000 thoughts colliding. Is this a mistake? Is it for someone else? But curiosity won, and she slipped it into her apron, promising herself she'd look later, because years of scraping by had taught her not to hope too quickly. The rest of her shift blurred by in clinking dishes and polite smiles, and it wasn't until she sat alone on the bus ride home, fluorescent lights flickering above her, that she finally opened the envelope, expecting maybe a kind note, maybe an apology, maybe nothing at all. Instead, a single sheet of heavy paper slid into her lap, followed by a cashier's check so large her hands began to shake, the numbers swimming before her eyes. $50,000. 000. And beneath it, a handwritten letter that read, "Maria, tonight you served me with patience and dignity when you had no reason to. I watched the way you spoke to the tired couple in booth 3, how you slipped extra fries to the kid who dropped his plate, how you carried yourself like your work mattered. I left no tip on purpose, not to punish you, but to make sure you'd find this without anyone else's eyes on you. Kindness is most powerful when it's unseen. Use this however you need. J." Tears came then, sudden and unstoppable, the kind that shook her shoulders as the bus rattled through familiar streets, because for the first time in years, relief washed over her in a way that felt almost frightening, like stepping into sunlight after a long winter indoors. She learned the next morning, from a breaking news segment playing on the diner's old TV, that the quiet man from booth 7 was Jonathan Hale, a self-made billionaire known for his philanthropy and his habit of testing systems rather than people. And suddenly the whispers began, co-workers buzzing with disbelief, when Maria quietly asked the manager for the day off, her heart pounding not with greed but with a careful, trembling hope. The money paid the bills, yes, but it did more than that. It bought time, and time gave Maria space to breathe, to think, to remember the nursing courses she'd abandoned after Leo's father left, the dream she'd shelved because survival had taken its place. Months later, Maria stood in scrubs instead of an apron, graduating from a community college program she'd finished with honors. Leo in the front row waving a homemade sign that read, "That's my mom." And when she received her first paycheck as a licensed practical nurse, she cried again, not because of the amount, but because of what it represented, momentum. She never spoke publicly about the check, never chased interviews or headlines, but she honored the letter's spirit in quiet ways, slipping grocery cards into the hands of struggling patients, paying for a stranger's gas, leaving generous tips with notes that said "you matter." And one afternoon, years later, when an elderly man grasped her hand in thanks after a long shift, Maria understood the full shape of what had been given to her. Not money, not luck, but belief. The world hadn't changed overnight and hardship hadn't vanished. But one intentional act of compassion had rippled outward, transforming fear into purpose, exhaustion into resolve, and a single mother's quiet perseverance into a life rebuilt, reminding her, and anyone willing to listen, that sometimes the most powerful generosity isn't what's left on the table in plain sight, but what's hidden just beneath the surface, waiting for someone who never stopped being kind to finally be seen.